Welcome to Biolab Teaching. If you people still not subscribe the channel, so the first of all subscribe the channel and click the bell icon. Biodiversity is a broad idea about the diversity of living organisms. And people often make the mistake that biodiversity is the same thing as the number of different species that are found in an area, but that's not actually true. There are three different ways to express biodiversity. The first one is the number and relative proportion of different species in an area, and that's what we call species diversity. The second one is the number of habitats in an area, simply called habitat diversity. And the third one is the range of genetic material within a population of a single species. And that one we call genetic diversity. So what I want to do is explain what each of these three concepts are. Species diversity, now that one includes number of species and the relative proportions. And the vocabulary we use is richness and evenness. Let's look at an example. If we've got two forests and we look at the number of species and the number of individuals of each species that are present, we can see that for the richness, forest number 2 is more rich. It has a higher species richness because it's got 4 species present compared with forest 1, which only has 3. Notice that it's got 0 of species C, so it's only got 3 species present there. In terms of evenness though, forest number 1 is more even because there are more similar numbers of each. They all range in population size from 250 to about 300. So they're all quite similar numbers. So how then could we figure out the species diversity from this? And this is where Simpson's diversity index comes in handy. So let's look at a little example of calculating these values here. So if we look at the Simpson's diversity index for forest 1 and forest 2, we plug these numbers in, we can see that we'll end up with values of 2.99 and 2.28 respectively. 2.99 means that forest 1 has a greater species diversity. So in this case, we take all things into account, forest number 1 has the greater species diversity. Habitat diversity, again, that's just the number of habitats that are found within a certain area, such as an ecosystem or biome. And there's a lot of different examples of those, such as ponds and forests and meadows, intertidal zones, things like that. Genetic diversity, this is the range of genetic material present in the population of a single species. And this is often the one that's the most difficult for people to understand. Let's look at a specific example. The Mauritian pink pigeon, and this is an endemic species. It can only be found on the island of Mauritius. And this was brought close to extinction in 1991 when it had only 10 individuals left. There was quite a lot of effort put into its conservation, and now the population is rising, so it's sort of a success story. But all of the pink pigeons that are alive today originate from this group of 10, which means there's a really small gene pool, which means it has a very low genetic diversity. There is very low genetic diversity within this population. Exam help sort of question you might get on that, maybe something like distinguish between genetic diversity and habitat diversity. Nice simple 2-mark question. You might say genetic diversity is the range of genetic material in a population of a species, but the habitat diversity is the range of different habitats or ecological niches in an ecosystem or biome. Essentially, if you know the definition of all of the different types of biodiversity, you could probably answer the questions on this.